I just got a request to do a follow-up video on my no consuming news sort of resolution that I gave myself at the beginning of 2021. And I figured I'd make a quick video, just let you guys know how that's going. If some of you guys have done something like that, I'm curious how it's worked out for you as well. So please do leave me a comment down below and let me know if you've cut back or completely cut out all of your news consumption. How has that affected you? So here's my story. So at the beginning of 2021, I was feeling that the news that I was consistently following and reading about and watching on YouTube was just driving me crazy. I was feeling more tense, more anxious, more angry, and more helpless basically through all of it. And so I decided, what am I doing here? I'm letting this news industry essentially control me, control my mind, control my emotions, and have me focus on all these horrible, horrible things. And, what I realized was that, all these horrible things, they might be horrible, but they're completely outside of my control. And so I was spending a lot of my mental effort and time throughout each day, struggling with issues that I could have done nothing about, and so it basically became a form of just torture, just self-torment. So I decided, let's stop that. That's not really healthy for me. So in 2021, I basically cut out all news consumption completely. So I had unsubscribed from everything that I was reading. I blocked websites. I went out of my way to ensure that even if I had a little moment of weakness, and I had plenty of them, I'm glad that I took my precautions, that I couldn't access those websites and I couldn't access those videos or those channels or all the different places that I was getting news from. So one of you guys wanted to know, how did that work out for me? Well, I can tell you for sure right off the bat, my stress levels went down, anxiety levels went down. But the most important thing, I think the big thing that I wanted to get away from and get away from the news for, was this feeling of like doom that would start to spiral in my mind for certain, news stories, certain things that would happen. It's big, it could be explosions, it could be wars, it could be, some lobbying enacted or whatever. But my brain has this nasty habit of taking a little thing that happens and then doing the slippery slope spiral where it just goes, well, this horrible thing is going to lead to another horrible thing. And then it's just going to be nonstop bad for the rest of my life. And the whole world's going down the tube and we're living in the end days and it's all over basically. And it makes you depressed essentially. And my brain is really good at that. It can find little things that the news talks about and it can start creating this narrative in my mind to really bum me out. It makes me feel like life is just terrible and everything's hopeless, right? So without watching the news, I got to just basically leave that behind and not really deal with that actually pretty much at all. Maybe once in a while, some thought would come in. And of course, even though I cut out the news, almost everybody in the world doesn't do this. So you have conversations with people in your life and you start hearing news stories and people saying, oh my God, did you hear about this? This is terrible. So their doom and gloom can come into my world a little bit. And so, at least though, when I was hearing their doom and gloom now, I was seeing it through a different filter though. Because if I was watching the news, I would probably be agreeing with him like, oh, you're totally right. It's all over. It's terrible. This is awful. But when I was not watching the news and somebody would come to me with that, I'd say, internally, I don't know if I ever said this to somebody out loud. I don't think I ever did. But internally, I would say, man, you're really following the news a lot. That's now the new thing. I wouldn't say, man, you're really telling the truth. You're right. The world is going to shit. It's horrible, right? I wouldn't go that far with what they were saying. I would say, man, you are really watching the news because that sounds like me a couple months ago. It's a mirror image, not a judgment, just to say, I recognize that mindset. I see, and I can probably tell you exactly where you're getting the news. It's so predictable now. I can see you watch the news, you'll have this mindset, you'll be either enraged, fearful, something, right? So that was actually the most beneficial part of my news fasting, was being able to get out of my filter, getting out of the sort of perspective that I'd created that the world was falling apart and horrible things were happening. And now seeing all of those thoughts and feelings as, no, I was just being bombarded with negative messaging over and over on a daily basis, doing it to myself. Nobody's doing it to me. I don't even blame the news industry. This was me voluntarily consuming this stuff day in, day out, right? So it was cool. It changed my perspective completely. So now if somebody does come to me with some doom and gloom, it doesn't have the same effect on me. It's still sometimes a struggle. I'm not going to say I'm just bulletproof from it. Sometimes those thoughts, I talked to an old buddy who's really paranoid about, one of my friends who's the world is always about to just come crashing down. The economy is about to come crashing down. It's just, there's always something that's about to go down. And that's why I don't talk to him that often. But when I do, I try to always internally have a sort of shield up of like, he has his perspective. He's heavily watching some news sources that are telling him the world's about to end. And I know exactly that he does this, that there are certain websites in particular, every article it's about to fall apart. The whole thing is going down the tubes. So that's what's really cool about what I did in terms of it just gave me this bigger perspective. So, and you know, I think one of the points that I made in that video when I told you guys I was going to cut out all news was that I wanted to take back control of my consciousness in the form of what I focus on, what I think is important. Because right now, of course, with the news of what's going on this week in the news, which I won't even repeat what's going on, but I heard it through people I talked to, not myself looking at the news, but everybody watches the news. So you hear about what happens, right? And, you know, some people, I heard them talk about it and they're just completely, you know, demoralized and upset and just, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I'm like, wow, that's really terrible. But, you know, for me, I hear it and I'm like, okay, well, you are being told how to feel about this, that this is the most important event that you need to be spending your time on, that you need to be thinking about, that you need to have your emotions wrapped up into. And for the most part, probably not much any of us can do much about it, right? For most of it, pretty much every event on the news, unless it's literally, you know, a car accident on your street or something happening in your town where you can show up and you can do something about it. Other than that, everything else is basically just, you know, horrible, terrible events. And that's what the news obviously biases for. They don't tell you about all the awesome things happening on planet Earth. They'll tell you about all the car crashes and carnage and blood. And they'll tell you about all the stuff that you can't do anything about. And that's how I see it now. And so the empowerment I feel to take back my own power and to say, that's not the stuff I need to be battling. You know, the stuff on the news is not my battle. 99% of it is not stuff that I need to even be aware of or think about. Some of you might think that I am willingly putting my head in the sand. That's fair. I don't necessarily see it that way. I see it as I'm being conscious about where I throw my energy and my mental effort, right? And I don't want a news organization or a collection of news organizations to tell me where I should be putting my mental energy and throw all of my emotion. I don't want them to tell me that. I want to decide that. So I'm going to pull back from all that kind of stuff, and I'm going to decide what battles should I really be fighting. And for the most part, you know, I have a lot of battles in my own personal life that I'm still going through, that I'll always be going through. There's a lot of work to be done, like right here in my house, in my mind. I've got a lot of work to do. I don't need to be worrying about the rest of the world. And as a side note, I also don't think that our minds were evolved to probably be able to handle news of the world. I mean, if you think about it, we probably evolved and developed ourselves in small, tiny tribes where the news of the day was what happened to your neighbor down the road, and that was about as far as you maybe needed to know. And to know about every horrible tragedy and war and horrible thing that's happening on planet Earth, it's like, I always think like our brains are, I don't know if they're really capable for that, if they're really meant for that. And I wonder if that's causing a lot of the anxiety and depression that we're seeing today. Not to mention social media, you know, having access to that many eyeballs looking at us and judging us and having to feel like we have to represent ourselves to the world. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're just sort of experimenting with right now that I think a lot of people are suffering with. Obviously, that's just, you know, the obvious comment of the decade, of course. So moving into 2022 this year, have I continued the fast? Well, not entirely. I definitely have allowed some news to come back in. And I felt like, you know, it's kind of like detoxing, essentially. I first needed to detox, get all that out of my life completely. But now that I have a better, I think, healthy handle on it, once in a while, every so often, I will partake and go check out the news, watch a video, read an article, do something like that, okay? But I definitely have limits on what I do now. I definitely have sort of strict guidelines on what I will heavily engage with and what I will sort of maybe just look at for a minute and go like, eh. And what's really cool now is that if I'm watching something or reading something and it's really getting into that sort of like, and this is an outrage and we should do this and this is terrible and, you know, can you believe that this person is doing that? It gets into this sort of like just outrage porn kind of thing. I actually get like repulsed from it and I get turned off and I actually just leave. And it's not that I have to go like, I really want to see this and I got to pull myself away. I know it's unhealthy for me. It literally starts to be repulsive now. It's like rotten. It starts to feel like, ooh, this is pulling me into stuff that I just can't care about and shouldn't care about. And it's just not my battle. So no thanks. And I really pull out. And I don't think I got that without my cutting out news completely. So I had to sort of pull away from the addiction, and that's definitely what it was, to now see that getting into these sort of outrage cycles or fear cycles that a lot of these news organizations will put you in is an addiction. And it's not, it might feel somehow, I don't know, safe or comfortable in the moment, but once you pull away for a while and you come back to it, you go like, man, that's really not for me, and it's not healthy, and it's actually kind of repulsive. So far, so good. And if I read something, watch something, and it starts giving me that doom and gloom and the world's over, I'm out. There's just now this new kind of limit that I will sort of go, okay, that's enough for today, I'm out. And I really, if it does affect me in some way, I try to realize that, how was I feeling the second before I read this? I was actually feeling pretty good about the world. The minute I started reading this or watching this video, I felt a little more bummed out about things. So has my reality changed? I mean, I have new information, but it really was just this source of entertainment, really. That's how I see it now. The news is just a form of entertainment. This form of entertainment is, not healthy for me, because it just changed my state of mind into something a little more negative. Not for a good reason. Like, if I'm going to get a negative state of mind, it should be because, somebody I know is suffering or hurting, or, there should be some personal reason why I'm feeling that way. Not because it's like a battle to be fought, thousands or, whatever, hundreds of thousands of miles away, something like that. We don't need to be, I don't think I need to be involved in most of the world's conflict and drama. I need to focus on myself, putting my own house in order. And I do kind of feel that that's basically, people say, like, how do you make a better world? Well, I really don't think going around pointing your finger at other people is the first step. I think the first step is to just focus on yourself, get yourself in order, get yourself in a place where you feel balanced and stable and healthy, in whatever way that works out for you. And let that be a sort of inspiration for other people. And if they want to clean up their own lives, they can do it themselves. But I don't know. I think when I was younger, I was much more of the type of like, we need to go around and change the world and convince people that they're wrong. And it's like, I don't know. I've given up on all that stuff. I really don't think, I think it's futile, first of all. But I just think that, taking care of myself and focusing on my battles is really what I got out of cutting out of the news. So anyways, sorry for the longer video there. Just wanted to update you guys on that. And please let me know how it's going for you. How is your news consumption working out for you, or lack of news consumption? What effects have you had? I really like to read that. So please post it below.